whether you're a manager in a retail location, whether, you know, you're a manager in corporate America, like the toughest part of managing any business is the people.
And that's a personality trait. Like, that's a flaw in my personality, right? Is where I always want to be the dude. If I know something has to be done, then I'm just gonna do it.
So what about that person, that kid that you seen the entrepreneurship mindset, right? Are you taking his or her entrepreneurship mindset away from them by making them an employee?
If you can't show up to work on time, you can't do anything. I don't care who you are. Like, I can't count on you for anything else if you can't show up to work on time. Let's talk about your team, right? Let's talk about what role, how important having the right people in place is. And I know on a food truck it could be challenging because a lot of people run 2-man or 3-man, right? So, you know, let's talk about how vital of a role each person plays and what that looks like.
Your team has to be able to have the mindset that you have that ownership vision, willing to go the extra mile. You have to have a team that can be self-sufficient without you telling them how to do it, right?
I think you've learned that the hard way, right?
And, yeah, absolutely. And it's taken me a year to do that. And now I'm to that point with the guys that I have on my truck that when we show up in the morning to load the truck, I don't have to load the truck anymore. It took me a year to figure out what I've figured out now is because my personality, it's hard for me to delegate, right?
Right.
My personality is I'm always the one to do the heavy lifting constantly, and that's a personality trait.
Gotcha.
Like, that's a flaw in my personality, right?
Is where
I always want to be the doer. I don't like delegating, right?
Right.
It's like if I know something has to be done, then I'm just going to do it.
But as the owner, you can't be the doer.
Exactly. You have to be able to delegate. You have to be able to let your team go out on their own and flourish.
I know that a lot of the times, one of the most frustrating aspects for a food truck owner or any business owner is hiring, right? And because, you know, it's one of the pain points in being in business, whether you're an owner, whether you're a manager in a retail location, whether, you know, you're a manager in corporate America, like the toughest part of managing any business is the people piece. And as a food trucker and as a food truck owner, you only have 1 or 2 people other than yourself that's part of your team. What are some good practices or best practices for hiring people? What do you think?
In the food truck world?
Yeah.
Roll the dice. Like, in all honesty, you know, I say that because when I think of food trucks or I talk to other food truckers, right? A lot of food trucks are going to be family.
Right.
So it's either husband and wife or
friends.
It's friends.
Friends of friends.
Yeah, or it's an owner and a son or owner and an aunt.
But I think that that's one of the biggest challenges for food truck operators or food truck owners is to find staff,
Absolutely.
Right? That's not friends or family, because at the end of the day, you know, your friends and your family are willing to help you, but they're only willing to help you to a certain extent. Even if you promise them, you know, $150, $200 for, you know, for a longer shift, but most of them have jobs, so they're helping you as an extra. And really, they're not really helping you for the money. They're helping you to get you out of a jam or get you out of a pickle, but it's not long term. So you can't count on that strategy long term. And what kind of experience are you giving to your customers when every time you go out to a shift, you have a different person on the truck, right? You can't build consistency, you can't build behaviors, and you can't vibe with that person. So what are you looking for when you're looking to hire the right candidate? Let's say you have the luxury of candidates not coming to you, but you can go out and find somebody, right? Because I think that that's important too. And that's probably a best practice, is to go out and recruit people to work for you. So, you know, whether it's at your local grocery store or at a local restaurant or a fast food place, like, you know, always be on the lookout for talent and for people that you think are good. They're engaged with, you know, they're engaged with their job, they're making eye contact with customers, they're executing their responsibilities, in their workplace. So, what are you looking for? Like, what is that employee, that perfect employee, food truck employee, what does that look like?
Oh, right off the bat, like if I'm going to look for an employee, there's two things that I'm looking for first, or there's two things that I want to know right off the bat. Is one, are you dependable? And two, are you punctual?
Okay.
Because if I can't depend on you to be here on time at 8 o'clock in the morning or at 2 p.m. when we're taking off, then like the truck is going out regardless.
So reliability.
It's got to be reliability and punctuality.
Punctuality,
You have to have those two things first before we can even move on to the next step.
Well, and that goes back to taking pride in what you do.
Absolutely.
And that associate has to take pride in what they do, right? And it starts with showing up to work on time. Like,
absolutely.
if you can't show up to work on time, you can't do anything. I don't care who you are. Like, I can't count on you for anything else if you can't show up to work on time, right? So reliability, super important. What else? What else are you looking for in,
so once you,
in an employee?
if you have reliability and you have punctuality down, right?
Right.
So then the next thing that I would personally be looking for is somebody who's energetic and then has good work ethic, right?
Okay.
But
you don't know that going in.
I was just going to say, how do you
exactly
gauge
like I said. So as long as you are reliable and punctual, then I have to start going on to the next step, right? Then I have to monitor you to see where I'm going with you next, right?
So, and
you're not gonna go out and find, like, you're not gonna analyze your next candidate just by watching them or just by looking at them right off the bat. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like those gut feelings you have to have first.
Right. And then you have to set expectations, right?
Absolutely.
So things like distractions in the workplace, like that's one of the things that we have struggled with in the past is like cell phones, right? Because we're in 2023, everyone's got a cell phone, everyone has a very short attention span, right? So they're looking to be entertained in between customers when there's not really nothing going on the truck or not a lot going on. Like, it's almost like a habit for especially the younger generation where they just pull out their phone and all of a sudden you're in a shift with them and they're watching TikTok or they're on Facebook or Instagram or, whatever else they're doing. But at the end of the day, it's a distraction and you're paying them to be there, right? So is the time being spent on their cell phone the best use of your money? Because their time is your money when they're on your truck, right? So you are investing in them to be there to serve a customer, but when the customer's not there, you should be cleaning, you should be looking for something to do. And if you set that precedent, then it doesn't get out of control. The behaviors don't become repetitive, because what ends up happening is if you don't nip that in the butt when there's no one at the window to take care of, then all of a sudden they are on their device and someone's standing there and they don't even know that they're standing there because they're watching a TikTok video. Right? Like, how many times have we seen that happen, or how many times have you experienced that as a consumer? So the answer is you got to be able to set expectations, and you can't be afraid to tell people, hey, this is what I need you to do, and this is what's not okay on my truck. It's one of the things that we struggle with because we constantly hire and we think that, just because we have a body and we have someone in place, we get comfortable, and we allow our employees to kind of do the bare minimum. And it's not because we don't expect more from them. It's because we're afraid of getting in that, of not having someone to go out and work a shift. Because when you're running 2-man or 3-man and one person's missing, it's almost impossible to go out onto the road that day, or it's almost impossible to go work a shift. So sometimes we accept, we accept traits or we accept behaviors that are below our standards, but just to have a body on the truck, just to be able to go out and work a shift. And I think that that's a mistake, because then you find yourself like we've all found ourselves at this table to where we're carrying the weight of ourselves and the weight of our employees in order to, be able to conduct business for the day. But what that does is it doesn't allow you to focus on the details, and it takes you away from what you should be doing, which is looking at things from the owner's the owner level, right? So instead of, going in and making sure that everything is done, you're actually stuck doing it. And then you don't have time to make sure that everything's done. So things slip through the cracks. So, one of the most important aspects of this business is making sure that you have a strong team around you. And the only way to have a strong team around you is to build a strong team. And the only way to do that is to set expectations and hold people accountable to those expectations. Right.
Yeah.
So you do that through checklists. You do that through training. You do that through repetition. So like Adam said earlier, it doesn't happen overnight, right? You can't just hire someone, show them once, and expect them to do it that way each and every time, right? Behaviors. What did they teach us in retail? Behaviors take 30 days to learn and to execute on a consistent basis. So. You can't expect to bring someone in, train them for 3 days, and then they know what to do. Balance is important.
You have to
so,
absolutely.
building a team on a truck is much the same as, building a relationship, any relationship in your life, whether it's with a spouse or a family member. Like, they say that opposites attract. Well, you kind of have to have a different skill set from that other person that's on the truck with you to be able to complement each other, and your skill sets have to complement each other. So, maybe that second employee doesn't have, the ability that you have to see things, see the long game. Like all the time you talk about the long game, right? So maybe that employee can't see the long game, and you're the visionary that can see it. And you should be, as the business owner, you should always be looking at things not about what's going on today or what's happening during this shift, but how this shift is affecting tomorrow's shift or next week's shift or next year, and that's your role and your responsibility as the owner, but you can't expect your employee to have that, right? So what are the things that you can't focus on, now, because it would take away from your focus on the overall vision that employee can execute, and how does that employee's skill set complement your skill set or complement what you've got going on the truck?
Is that a rhetorical question?
Yeah, it's one of those things that you should think about whenever you're assessing, whether you have the right people in place.
Gotcha.
And you can't be afraid to move on from people. I think that, we talk about burnout, and we talk about people in the industry, losing focus. And after that 100th order, that 200th order, that quality starts to fall, whatever the case may be. It's the same thing with an employee. Like if you've had multiple conversations and you're coaching and you're training and you're saying, hey, this is what I need you to do, and they're not executing, you can't be afraid to move on from that employee and find someone else, because at the end of the day, like, your responsibility is to your business and it's not to your individual employees, no matter how long they've been with you, whether they're friends, whether they're family. Because a lot of the times, like, we get into business and our family's helping us out. But at the end of the day, your responsibility is to your business, and you need to always keep that in mind, and always make the decisions that are best for your business. And sometimes that means taking a toxic person out of the workplace and removing them, because as an owner, that falls on you. So let's say you've had an employee for 3 years, and they started the truck with you, because this happens a lot, right? You're the first person you hire ends up being your right-hand person. Now they've been with you for 3 years, and all of a sudden in year 3, their passion and their drive just isn't there. But you feel responsible to keeping them there because they've been there since day one, right? They're your ride or die, right? But if they were your ride or die, they would still have the same passion and the same enthusiasm, because they know and understand how important upholding your brand is and making sure that the business continues to grow. Every individual is a tool in your tool belt, right? Your employees are tools in your tool belt. You have to have the right tools, for each stage in your business. And sometimes your business changes. And if your employees can't adapt, then you have to move on from them, because if not, they're going to become anchors and they're going to hold you back from continued growth. And change is really hard. It's one of the hardest things of life in general. And people don't like change because change is tough. It's hard. It's hard learning new things. It's hard, setting new expectations. It's hard achieving those new expectations, right? Because there's comfort in consistency. Like if something's consistently the same day in and day out, you get comfortable and you feel good about it. And it's like, it's second nature, right? You can do things with your eyes closed, but you can't grow. A business can't grow if it's not constantly evolving and constantly changing, because time is always moving forward. So in order for you to keep up with time and keeping up with the times, you have to change and you have to adapt, right? COVID came. And the trucks that were around before COVID that didn't adapt, they didn't pivot, they didn't change, they're no longer in business. And every year, every day, there's a different COVID. It's just not as big and not as grand. But every time, the industry shifts or the industry changes, or, food is very, it's very fluid, right? There's different trends that come in and out. I remember a few years ago, like sriracha came onto the market and everyone had like a sriracha something. It was, Popeye's Chicken had a sriracha chicken sandwich, and all these places infused sriracha into their menu. And when's the last time someone really talked about sriracha? Like it's been a long time. Now it's just an ingredient that we use in a sauce, but it's not like a main feature. Same thing with tacos. What are those tacos that are super popular that a couple years ago they came on the scene that
the ones that are dipped inside the sauce?
Yeah, the birria tacos, like that was a huge thing a couple of years ago. And there's trends, right? And you have to be able to keep up with those trends. And as a food truck, like you want to be on the forefront of those trends so that you get people excited and you get new customers to you. But if you have a staff that's unwilling to try new things, right? Or every time you try to introduce something different, they're like, we have to change this again and do this again. That's not a person that you want on your truck, right? Because they're holding you back from that next step, from that next trend, from growth.
Well,
and sometimes it's, the person that's closest to you. Sometimes it's your second in command, right? Where they fall into a routine and they get comfortable, and all of a sudden maybe you step away to focus on another venture or to focus on growing the business, and you leave that person in charge. And if that person isn't willing to grow with you, or if that person isn't willing to take that owner mindset and say, hey, these are the new things that we can try, and these are the things that we should test, right? They're just holding you back. Then your business becomes stagnant.
And then you lose money. So,
because people are addicted to the new thing. Like they want to try the new restaurant on the block, the new food truck on the block. Like when we, with All About Food Trucks, the organization, my booking organization, every time we send a new truck out, that truck blows the average out of the water. And the reason why is because it's a new truck. People want to try it for the first time. It's something new. And people in general, like you're always chasing new experiences. You always want to try things for the first time. So I think that's why it's important for us to continue, changing and adapting and evolving so that we don't fall behind the time. Let's say that you're a food truck and you're a food truck owner and you found your right-hand person, right? And they're a great asset to the truck. They do everything they're supposed to do. They execute every shift, every time they show up, and they're just all around great. How do you keep that person long-term?
I think before you can answer that question for that employee or that associate or that staff member, whatever you want to label them as, you have to ask yourself, what are you doing this for?
Okay.
Is this something that you do long-term goal, or is this something that you're doing for flexibility and freedom?
Right.
Because if this is something that you're doing for flexibility and freedom,
right, then they have no future.
Then they have no future,
and you can't offer them a future.
You have nothing to offer them.
Right.
So your goals and your end goal and your mindset, or whatever your overall goal plan for your business is going to dictate on what you can do and how you can do for your employees.
I agree 100%.
So if your drive isn't there to grow the business, to create more food trucks, to get into a food truck park, or to create a brick and mortar, then
you're going to have to accept the
Exactly.
constant.
It's gonna be a revolving door.
Right.
You don't.
You don't have anything to offer them.
Exactly.
Right.
You have an employment to offer them.
Right.
But they have to understand, and a lot of times in the hospitality industry, in the restaurant industry, that's what people have. They have employment.
Or they're college kids that are
they're
going to
college kids,
school and they're just looking for a job
It's
to pay their
very
bills.
rare to find that diamond in the rough,
Right.
or that young entrepreneur that wants that drive. Because then if you do find that person and your goal was to just for flexibility and freedom, but now you found this diamond in the rough.
Right. If you
that
don't take advantage of that
person may push you and drive you
to grow.
to grow.
Right.
Exactly.
You still sounded like a politician with that answer.
But that's the right answer.
That's a complete right answer.
Right.
I mean, I get it.
Right.
I get it. But
So-
what about that person, that kid that you've seen the entrepreneurial shit mindset, right? Are you taking his or her entrepreneurial shit mindset away from them by making them an employee and making them stay as an employee?
No, I think that you.
How do you see what I'm saying?
If you yourself as an owner are
Yeah.
not willing to grow, then absolutely.
Yeah. You're hurting them.
You're hurting them.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
The best you can do for them is to teach them what you know and hopefully, expand their skill set and
and
then
then they can run off and create their own business.
help them achieve.
Show them
And
the
then you
ropes.
gotta find the diamond
Let
in the
them
rough.
save their money, and they create a food truck.
Well, the problem is that if you're not in a position to where you're looking to grow your business or continue to grow, then your business is stagnant, right? Even if it's successful, but you're doing the same thing day in and day out. You're bringing in the same amount of revenue, the same sales. You can't have employees where you're giving them a raise every year or where you're giving them incentives to stick around long term because you're not growing, right? So each time, let's say your truck does $300,000 a year and you've done $300,000 a year for the last 4 years, right? And you have employees, and let's say that each and every year you've given your employees a $70 raise a week or a $50 raise a week or whatever that raise looks like. But if you're not creating more revenue, then that's taking money out of your pocket, right? So if you're not growing, it's really hard to have your employees grow under you. And that's the point that Adam's trying to make. So at that point, you just have to accept that, hey, every 6 months, every year and a half, I have to find somebody and retrain them and rehire them.
Absolutely.
Because you have to, it's a balance, and you have to accept that as part of your business plan, because at the end of the day, you're just looking to work enough shifts to pay your bills, right? And to meet your responsibilities in your household. And that's all that you're looking for. Well, you're not going to keep anyone long term because, it's really hard to do. Yeah.